So, The Sound of Metal is the story of a drummer who has probably the worst thing that could happen to him is losing his hearing. Um, now, the drummer is Ruben Stone, and he's played by Riz Ahmed. And this is by far one of Riz Ahmed's this is definitely, I think, like a career best performance here. I couldn't believe how much he transformed for this role. So Ruben is a drummer, and he seems like he's pretty good at it. He seems like he's got enough experience. He loves what he does. He does it with his woman Lou, played by Olivia Cook, and they're both partners. They're both in it together. They both love each other deeply. And so one day, Ruben just wakes up and realizes that he can't quite hear very well. It feels like like he's underwater. Like he can't quite hear anything. It feels like his ears are plugged up. So he tries to, make some noise, make some sound to try to maybe his ears will pop or something. He listens to like running water, tries to check that his hearing is still kind of there, but it's muffled. Like he knows like he's going deaf, and it's one of those things where he doesn't want to admit that he is losing his hearing, because it's such like a crucial part. He's a drummer. He has to hear the sound of the music, and if he can't do that, what does he feel like he can do anymore? So Ruben initially seeks help, but he seeks help, but he seeks it reluctantly because he realizes that if I lose this, there's nothing for me. I don't think I can be a drummer anymore, and what worth do I have? And it gets very painful and very, very tragic, and he even gets very suicidal at a few moments. Now, what I love so much about the way that this film is directed is that for most of that first half, we only hear what Ruben hears. We only hear like the distorted audio. I think for like a good 15 minutes, we're just stuck with him. We're just stuck with the audio track of being inside his mind, where he can't quite hear anything, and it's frustrating and maddening for him, and we feel that on screen. So we pretty much stick with him up to like the point where he gets to like the doctor and they tell him that yeah, your hearing's going, and Lou tries to be there for Ruben. She tries to support him. She tries to like do everything that's right for him, but Ruben just keeps shoving everyone away and feels like there's nothing to live for anymore. It's not until Lou actually brings him to a deaf community that can help him sort of like adjust to being deaf and communicating with other people, finding stuff to do, and just feeling comfortable enough where you can understand and perfectly do sign language. And it's not easy for him. He's introduced to the place by Joe, who's played here by Paul Rassi. And this is another astounding performance too. Paul really has this great commanding performance of someone who's had experience, and doesn't want to take crap from anyone. Like he's willing to help Ruben, but only if Ruben wants the help. Like Ruben just shoves everyone away, and he doesn't think Joe can help, and he doesn't think he wants help. But Joe's like, you know what? I've been around the block. I know what's going through this guy's head, and he's gonna need help. And it's not easy for Ruben. When he gets in the deaf community, he can't have his phone. He has to communicate with other people with sign language, which is not going to be easy. But eventually, he starts to get used to it, and he starts to understand sign language. He starts doing it better. He starts taking classes. He starts connecting with other students who realizes that he can use his drumming technique to be a teacher. But he still longs to, have his hearing back because he feels like he needs that as a drummer. And so then we get into this very complicated area of the story of trying to, of Ruben trying to raise the money to get a hearing implant, which are exceptionally expensive. But then once he gets the hearing implant, there's this questioning about, how demeaning is it to the deaf community that their hearing entirely depends on whether or not they can afford it. And if they can't afford it, then where does that leave them, And it's this very deep questioning about, accepting your deafness. And there's a little bit of the questioning of the healthcare system. Not a lot, though. It's mostly just a personal journey of Ruben for realizing, like how much of his life he's leaving behind. Because even when he gets the implant, it's still like, he can hear, but he can still hear like distorted. Like the best way I can compare it to is like, if anyone grew up in like the early 2000s and watched a video online when it would be like heavily compressed and distorted, it sounds like that. And it becomes rather heartbreaking when he realizes that when he has this implant, he still might not be able to hear music the same way again. And so, like, the film as a whole is just a big portrait of just about like acceptance. Because by the end of the picture, Ruben learns to like accept his condition and try to live with it and not feel like it's so much of a burden as he's felt it is for throughout most of the film. Now, this type of film could have just been like straight melodramatic. The music could have swelled. There could have just been like, typical moments of frustration that, we've seen in like a lot of other like disability dramas. But not here. Director Darius Marder does a great job letting us into Ruben's world and making it feel like it's a serious issue and that it has consequences that are deeply heartbreaking. And part of that is, like I mentioned, keeping us within the mind of someone who is deaf by only hearing like the distorted audio that they can hear. There's an exceptionally touching moment in the film where he's connecting with the student outside. One of the students just has to take a breather, so Ruben takes him outside. And they try to connect on the playground. They have like a metal slide there. And Ruben just kind of like, taps it a little bit, and the boy listens, and then he taps back, and they sort of connect a little bit through there. And it's like a very, very, very calm, very quiet moment. And there's a lot of moments throughout this film that just embrace the quiet of it all. Like, I like how one of the biggest points of drama is that Ruben realizes that he has to push Lou away because, he has to like sever contact. But at the same time, he realizes that Lou has a career of her own. Like, she's still involved in music. So he basically wants to say, like, you know what? I'll stay here. You go off on your own. Just, it's going to be painful. But you know what? I don't want to hold you back. And that's an exceptionally heartbreaking moment, especially for Lou, because Olivia Cooke has several moments where she just realizes that she can't help Ruben through most of this, and that it tears her up inside not to be able to do that. There's a later point in the film around the third act where Ruben will meet Lou's father, and they have a stunning moment of connection there. There's a lot of points here where I was surprised at just how much like character depth there is to this type of story. Like, for instance, like Ruben actually has a very interesting backstory. Like, he's not just like your typical drummer, just like your typical drummer on the rise. Like, he actually has a history of drug addiction that he's gotten over. So there's an added level of tragedy that, he's overcome this major issue in his life of, getting over addiction, only to be faced with another hardship of having his hearing go out. And especially since like Lou has been with him every step of the way here, that it's also heartbreaking that they gotta part ways, just so that he feels that he can get the help, just so that she and he feels that they can get the help that Ruben needs. Just fantastic performances here all around. I mean, like, Olivia Cooke does a great job. Riz Ahmed has such a powerful performance here. Like, even when he has to like fully embrace like, doing sign language and has to rely on just his emotional cues and just his facial reactions, it's amazing when he has to do a lot of these scenes just like silently, especially since a lot of the stuff in the second act, a lot of the drama relies on the silence of Ahmed throughout the film. In particular, he sneaks away to a computer. He realizes that he can't quite use the computers in the deaf camp, but when he does go to the computer to check his email, he notices emails from Lou and looks her up and realizes that she's doing well. and that is something that he's trying to grapple with and deal with. There are also a lot of great moments of contemplation. Like, for instance, one of the exercises that Joe recommends Ruben does is to just sit in a room, just with the quiet, and then if something compels you to write, just write something down. It doesn't matter. It can be a poet. It can be like a poem. It could be a novel. It could be an essay. Anything. Just write scribbles, whatever. And it feels like there's like some small elements that come about through it. And it's surprising also how, by the third act, it takes an interesting shift in how people like Ruben would view the deaf community, and trying to live with yourself, even if you have the implants, still trying to live with your condition. So the film brings up a lot of intriguing points that I didn't expect it to, while also just having like a fine performance and just great directing here. Like there are a few scenes in the first act where you do get like the drummer sequences where you sort of hear the hearing slowly start to fade with Ruben and sort of like come in and out. And by the time it starts like really degrading, like he just keeps playing like louder and louder just so that he can hear something. And it's really painful. Like I've had moments when, my ears are plugged up or, for whatever reason, and I just get like terrified. Like I keep snapping my fingers. I would listen to water just because like I fear that, that my hearing would be going. And if my hearing went, that's a terrifying thought, because then you would have to change your whole way of life. But Sound of Metal actually stresses, how it how you can still live with yourself with that, and how, it's not the end of the, how it's not the end of the world. And by like the final shot of the film, when Ruben has like fully come to embrace himself and realizes that being deaf is not such a bad thing, can actually be like quite peaceful, and that you can still enjoy a lot of life. It's actually pretty powerful. I didn't expect that. I fully expected this film to just lean in heavy on the melodramatics and not really take that much of a serious focus on being deaf, but it surprisingly did, and I actually really love it. Like, this is definitely one of my favorite films of the year. Riz Ahmed, I think, is definitely one of the best performances of the year. A real surprise, though, from Paul Rassi. I hope that a lot of people don't forget this guy. It seems like a lot of people are really loving his performance as well, but just all around, just great performances, great direction, and just pitch perfect drama that touches on like a lot of interesting and controversial topics regarding disabilities. So, for The Sound of Metal, 4.5 out of 5 stars.